Hey, Miss Brandon's class. Welcome to our English Language Arts channel and welcome to this Monday morning. Today we're going to be talking about comparing and contrasting stories. When you compare and contrast a story, there are some things that you want to keep in mind. I want you to repeat these words after me. I can compare and contrast similar stories and answer questions such as who, what, where, when, why, and how about these stories. When you are comparing two stories, you're trying to see how they are alike or the same. When you contrast two stories, you're trying to see how they are different. You can do this by using a Venn diagram. A Venn diagram helps you organize your thoughts. One circle represents the first story, another circle represents the second story. Where these circles overlap is where you write things that both of those stories have in common. I know in our read aloud today, you listened to The Frog Prince Continued by John Sieska. That's actually a fairy tale, or a fractured fairy tale, that is a spin-off of an original fairy tale called The Frog Prince, written by the Brothers Grimm. I'm going to read that to you here today, and you can actually upload this story and read it for yourself. Go ahead and listen as I read. The Frog Prince by the Brothers Grimm. Adapted by Mrs. Brandon. One fine evening, a young princess went out to take a walk by herself in the woods. She came to a cool spring of water with a single rose floating in the middle. She sat down to rest for a while. Now she had her favorite toy in her hand. It was a golden ball. As she rested, she continued to toss it up into the air and catch it. Eventually, she threw it up so high that she missed catching it and the ball bounced away. It rolled along the ground until at last it fell into the spring. Plop! The princess looked into the spring after her ball, but it was very deep. It was so deep that she could not see the bottom of it. Then she began to cry and said, "If I could only get my ball back again, I would do anything." While she was speaking, a frog put its head out of the water and said, "Princess, why do you cry?" The princess was surprised by the talking frog. She replied, "What can you do for me, you nasty frog? My golden ball has fallen into the spring." The frog said, "I do not want your riches, only your love. If you will let me stay at your castle for 3 nights, I will find you your toy and bring it to you." "What nonsense," thought the princess. "This silly frog is talking. He can never even get out of the spring to visit me, though he may be able to get my ball for me, and therefore I will tell him he shall have what he asks." The princess planned to trick the frog to get her toy back. So she said to the frog, "Well, if you will bring me my ball, I will do all you ask." Then the frog put his head down and dived deep under the water. After a little while he came up again with a ball in his mouth and threw it on the edge of the spring. As soon as the young princess saw her ball, she ran to pick it up. She was filled with so much joy that she forgot about the frog and ran home with her toy as fast as she could. The frog called after her, "Stay, princess, and take me with you, as you said." But she did not stop to listen to the frog. The next day, just as the princess had sat down to dinner, she heard a strange noise. Tap, 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 splash, splash, as if something was coming up the marble staircase. Soon afterwards, there was a gentle knock at the door, and a little voice cried out and said, "Open the door, my princess dear. Keep your promise that you made to me at the spring." Then the princess ran to the door and opened it, and there she saw the frog whom she had forgotten. At this sight she was frightened and shut the door as fast as she could, walking back to her seat. The king, her father, seeing that something had frightened her, asked her what was wrong. "There is a nasty frog at the door," said the princess, "that lifted my ball for me out of the spring this morning. I told him that he should stay here for 3 nights, thinking that he could never get out of the spring, but there he is at the door. He wants to come in." While she was speaking, the frog knocked again at the door and said, "Open the door, my princess dear. Keep your promise that you made to me at the spring." Then the king said to the young princess, "As you have given your word, you must keep it. Go and let him in." She listened to her father, the king. The frog hopped into the room and then straight on, tap, tap, splash, 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 from the bottom of the room to the top, till he came up close to the table where the princess sat. "Lift me up on a chair," he said to the princess, "and let me sit next to you." As soon as she had done this, the frog said, "Put your plate next to me so that I can share your food." This she did, and when he had eaten as much as he could, he said, "Now I am tired. Carry me upstairs and tuck me into bed." And the princess took him up in her hand and put him upon the pillow of his new bed in his new bedroom, where he slept all night long. As soon as it was light out, he jumped up, hopped downstairs, and went out of the castle. "Now then," thought the princess, "at last he is gone, and I will not have to worry about him any more." But she was wrong. When night came again, she heard the same tapping at the door, and the frog came once more and said, "Open the door, my princess dear. Keep your promise that you made at the spring." When the princess opened the door, the frog came in, hopped to his new bedroom, and slept on his pillow until morning came. On the third night he did the same, but when the princess awoke the following morning, she was surprised to see that instead of the frog, a handsome prince was waiting outside her bedroom for her, with a bouquet of roses and the most beautiful eyes she had ever seen. He told her that he had been enchanted by an evil fairy who had changed him into a frog, and that he had been cursed until a princess saved him from the spring and let him stay in her castle for 3 nights. "You," said the prince, "have broken the spell, and now I have nothing to wish for but that you would marry me, so we can live happily ever after." The young princess, you may be sure, said, "Yes." And so the prince and princess got married and lived happily ever after. The end. So, here you can see some similarities and some differences in our 2 stories. Let's go ahead and talk about these similarities and these differences. In The Frog Prince, we have the characters, the princess, the frog, and the king. And the frog helps the princess by getting her toy back, but the princess ends up helping the frog by breaking the curse. And she does this by allowing him to stay in the castle for 3 nights. And so the setting of this story takes place in 2 different places. We have the spring and we have the castle. When you listen to The Frog Prince Continued, the only characters are the princess and the frog, but he's now the prince, and they are very unhappy. So, because of this unhappiness, the prince leaves for a day. He wants to be a frog again. This story takes place in the castle and the forest. Now, both stories obviously have a princess and a frog. They don't both have a king. They both take place in some instances in the castle, but not always. As you see in The Frog Prince Continued, the prince ventures out into the forest to find a witch who will turn him back into a frog. But in The Frog Prince, the story mainly takes place at the spring and at the castle. It's important to notice these similarities and these differences when we're reading stories that are very much alike. I want you to keep that in mind today as you complete your reading assignment. I hope you have a great Monday, and we'll see you next time.